for the record, Jennifer, do we want to take roll or
We
is it?
do have a quorum present, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good enough. The first item of business is to review and approve the agenda for this meeting. So I would entertain a motion.
So moved. This is Heather.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Do we have a second?
Seconded. This is Jason.
Thanks, Jason. So moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. We have an agenda. Thank you. And now we'll move to the minutes. And Jennifer sent those out with the packet from the past meeting as well as this agenda. Um, do we have a motion to put on the table the minutes for review or approval?
So moved.
Thanks, Jason. And a second?
This is Heather. I'll second.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think we're kind of down to, I think the two of you are getting the heavy lifting this morning on these two. So moved and seconded to approve the meetings from the minutes from the last meeting. Any discussion on those meeting minutes? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Meeting minutes from the past gathering have passed. Any public comment, Jennifer? Doesn't look like anyone's on.
There is no one online.
Okay. At this point, if I could turn it over to you, Commissioner Swanson, for an update on workforce.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Our work supporting the Stillwater mine and the folks laid off in November continues. You may have seen that we did receive $3.5 million in National Dislocated Worker Funds to continue supporting those workers in the categories that we've previously talked about: relocation, retraining, and the supportive services category for both the workers and their spouses, and any additional individuals laid off in the community as a result of the broader community impacts. That award is significantly lower than what we originally requested. We requested $11.5 million and we're granted 3.5. We're kind of in a holding pattern here to decide whether or not we think it's appropriate to go ahead and request more. But the good news is we can do a lot of good to support these workers and their families with 3.5 million. And so we're getting to work right now deploying those funds. We'll see what the new administration does coming in. The U.S. Department of Labor did just put out new technical assistance guidance for dislocated worker funding earlier this week that appears to cap all dislocated worker grants at $2 million. Since we've exceeded that, I don't know what the implications are for these workers, but the good news is we can do a lot of good with 3.5 million. We're going to get to work. We'll see what the new leadership at the U.S. Department of Labor looks like after the new administration is sworn in, and we'll decide what to do next. But we've got funds in hand and we're prepared and moving forward. Great partnerships with local community officials, elected officials, and our two-year college network to start putting together cohorts and other opportunities of retraining for these individuals. And we're really looking optimistically forward. You may have seen the U.S. Supreme Court's or the Montana Supreme Court's decision allowing the Tintina mine at White Sulphur Springs to move forward, which may provide an opportunity for some upskilling and retraining, waiting to hear from their staff when they think hiring may begin. But the project is back on track. So excited about the energy opportunity and the proximity to where these laid off individuals currently reside. With that said, we have our friends from the Montana legislature back in town. Today is day 7, week 2. They joined us last Monday and we are off to the races. It honestly feels like it's far more than week 2. They've been busy, therefore we've been busy. Last week was largely organizational in nature, getting going, especially in the Senate. The House did begin hearing bills last week. As for the Department of Labor, we mainly focused on reintroducing ourselves to the legislature. We did committee introductions where we introduced ourselves, our programs, and our people, really talking about the work that we do to serve the citizens of Montana. We came in on a few large legislative proposals last week, things like the state pay plan in House Bill 13 and some others, but our work really begins in earnest this week. The Department of Labor and Industry has 23 individual legislative proposals in play. that we believe will start being heard for hearing as soon as next week, starting with 2 of our apprenticeship proposals, expanding the number of apprenticeable occupations in Montana, we believe will be first. So we're looking forward to a great session. Leadership is in place. They've been great to work with, and we're looking forward to the work we can do for Montanans. I think as this week continues, we'll get into it even more. One of our members of the SWIB, on behalf of the legislature, Representative Seekins Crow, starts us off with our first policy bill of the session tomorrow, dealing with unemployment benefits in Montana. So we are ready to jump in and get going. And I'm just grateful for our stakeholders that were a part of developing all of these proposals throughout the interim, much like Ms. O'Hara from the Montana Hospital Association. She's graciously invited me to join their board on Thursday of this week to talk more in depth again about our proposals and what we're hoping to accomplish this session. But happy to stand for any questions you might have as we get ramped up going into this year's legislative session.
Any questions for Commissioner?
Could I briefly add something additional? I just wanted to make sure you all caught this yesterday. I think, Jason, correct me if I get any of this information wrong, but as part of the kind of congressional wrap up CR before Sine Die, there was authorization for additional tech hub funds, about $500 million. Part of that comes from existing appropriations, part of it comes from future FCC auctions. But it appears that the decisions right now are to award additional tech hubs rather than come back and award projects within tech hubs that weren't funded. So that's something for, I think, the governor's office, DLI, and SWIB to contemplate, is whether or not there's interest in weighing in and saying, hey, instead of just adding tech hubs, let's get some of these projects online that weren't funded. But just wanted to make sure Tim Van Rink had sent that out yesterday. Wanted to make sure everybody caught that in their barrage of emails.
Yeah, that is correct, Jennifer. The original intent, from my understanding, was there was 31 hubs chosen, only 12 were funded. The remainder were given $500,000 to continue moving forward. And this $500,000,000 that was appropriated is going to hubs that hadn't received first round funding to continue their efforts.
So, Jason, maybe just a question for clarification. So this additional funding would go to hubs that have already submitted the projects. I mean, it's not, you can't, my hope here was, and it's, the timeline is, I'm sure, way too late, but would there be a way to put a bolt-on hub together to augment the hub we already have funding for? Or is this just going back to those original, as you said, unfunded hubs exclusively?
These are going to the original unfunded hubs. Of the 31, only 12 received funding in July. And we were one of those 12. The remainder of that 19-ish, several more received funding yesterday.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Would have been nice if they could have fully funded the 12 and then took the incremental to other ones, but if I could ask one question, Commissioner, and this is more on maybe on a hopeful note. Has there been any response? I mean, any word from Sibanya Stillwater in terms of forward operations, current layoffs, any sense of where their direction might be? And she might be busy.
Yeah, someone may have stepped into her office, so I can just share what I know. They certainly have been doing an aggressive media tour to suggest that operations will return, that there's federal policy changes that could bring the mine back. I think what we hear from miners is a lot of skepticism about that. There's some insights as to operations on the ground that I don't fully understand that I think are creating some doubt that they would restart operations anytime soon. So, I think certainly they continue to push that narrative, but I'm not sure it's resonating with the workers in the sense that I don't see workers taking temporary jobs hoping to be called back.
Okay, that's probably the most telling evidence of where it's at.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I've got the wrong agenda up because we're going to that next agenda. Next on the topic is our January get-together meeting via Zoom. Um, and if we could have a motion to put on the table that meeting agenda for discussion. Okay, thanks, Dylan. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Moved and seconded to approve the upcoming January full SWIB board meeting agenda. Any discussion on that agenda? I think the one too many screens, sorry. The one question I'd have, Jennifer, just to understand. Um, so our I just don't know how you do this in Zoom. Is there a way to create virtual breakout rooms for the
Yes.
committee work?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
excellent.
So we'll send people into their committees, and then Paul, if you want, I could show you how you can pop in and out of them.
Okay, that would be that'd be great because I know
Yeah.
we've done that with Teams, and obviously I'm not doing it. I get sent somewhere, and that's the extent of my. I just black out and show up with a different group, so that'd be great. So that was my only question. Just
Yep.
understand. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay. We have a meeting agenda for January, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you all.
And I'm going to eliminate that agenda because I keep looking at it for this meeting. Okay. So next is the strategic framework update, and I'll turn it over to you, Jennifer, for an update.
Great. Thank you. So I would like to see us move forward with making a recommendation to the governor on an adoption of a strategic plan. So what you see here and what I have sent out previously, what I sent out for this meeting is this one pager at a glance. So we have come quite a ways in the strategic plan since the October meeting, based on all the great feedback from SWIB members. So this reflects a lot of the input that we've had since then, really being very clear that this is a three-pronged approach, employee-employer systems, and laying out what those will be. You will see here on the left under 406 jobs that we have added in entrepreneurship as a pathway to work. There is an ongoing question, one that I want to put to SWIB this Friday as a part of our conversation on refining this, is with respect to that military pathway. There is certainly, and Dylan can speak to this at the national level, growing conversations about thinking about other forms of service as pathway to career, community service, AmeriCorps service, those sorts of pathways. And so I'd like to hear from SWIB members if we would define our four pathways as college, career, military, entrepreneurship, or if we'd like to expand it to be college, career, military, service, military and service, and entrepreneurship. We have this struggle here that is really important to keep in tension. I think it's, at least my approach in developing this for you all, has been to create a framework where our workforce partners across the state find a place for themselves. So we sort of want to use this to gather the workforce system under a common umbrella. So we want it to be broad enough that all of the tremendous local and regional work sees a way to come together under a unified system. But at the same time, we still need to be strategic, and we need to prioritize some specific initiatives and measure progress against them. So creating that balance of a framework for our entire workforce system and a strategic priority list is just a balancing act. And this is one of those questions. Do we want to really focus on these four pathways, or would we want to add in some sort of volunteerism service component into it? So that's going to be one of the questions that we put to SWIB on Friday. And then need to continue talking about the high demand industries. Heather and I have had a conversation about whether we keep this narrowly to healthcare, as in direct medical service providers, or if we expand it to something like health careers, which would create space for the governor's priorities around behavioral health and potentially even address other careers where we know there's big gaps in employment, like dentistry or public health in general. The same is true for the construction trades category. Do we want to keep it there? Do we want to expand it to something that reflects more of our legacy industries, like a production, extraction, and construction trades, which would create space for logging, mining, and agriculture? Or do we want to just delete it and call it skilled trades and be open to trades of all types? All of those are existing economic and workforce classifications, so any of them would be appropriate. It's just up to SWIB of how narrow or how broad we want to recommend to the governor that this be. So those are some of the conversations that we want to have on Friday. I want to get into one more issue, but I'm going to pause there for a second and see if there's questions or discussions around those specific issues.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I think it'd be helpful if we could come to the full SWIB with a little bit of specific direction and some recommendations. Otherwise, of course, there's a lot of different vested interests around the table, so the conversation could go a lot of different ways. It is tough striking that balance between being specific enough and broad enough. I guess it should probably largely be driven by DLI's labor market information. So yeah, the governor's been interested in service to career, but I wonder how large of a population that is of young people compared to those four existing categories that we have here. My thought would be maybe it's a smaller subset and maybe that can fit underneath career training or entrepreneurship, but I'm not opposed to adding it either. I would just want a little bit more information, probably from Sarah Sadowski, about her population. And same with healthcare and construction. You know, I don't know what the average person thinks of when they think of construction trades, but obviously there's a lot of associated industries that go into the construction industry. Same with healthcare. There's a lot of complementary career pathways and industries that go into healthcare. So I would probably lean towards keeping it a little bit more focused and a little bit more broad, and letting people fill in the gaps, kind of attaching themselves to these high demand industries and seeing where they fit under. But those are just some of my initial thoughts.
Yeah. I was thinking along the lines what Dylan just mentioned, that fine line between being very specific and then the dilution that's created, if you will, from broadening things out to catch everything. I think, when I think about the word trades, it tends to focus my mind more on more union specific plumbers, electricians, you know, and you make a good point, Dylan. It's a very broad, that's a really construction is by nature broad. But yeah, I think this is a good discussion, and I'd be curious what the full board has to say. Where do we strike that balance?
Yeah, I guess I like where it's at right now. I think that this is a really good framework. I don't have any specific ways that I would change it, but when we bring it to the full SWIB, maybe there'll be suggestions.
And from your perspective, Dylan and Commissioner Swanson, when we think about the governor's initiatives, do we lay up well against that initiative in terms of how we've got this bracketed, or do we need some adjustment in certain areas to better fit his administration's direction?
I think you're in great shape, Paul. I just had my ops review with the governor yesterday where we reviewed, the progress SWIB is making towards this recommendation. He's looking forward to it. There is not a unified workforce strategy right now cross agency. We're looking forward to you finalizing this proposal so I can take it to the governor, at which point we'll begin including the other agencies as they've got key programs and services in these lanes as well. So we're looking forward to a spring delivery of the proposal to the governor.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be my recommended next step is let's get this in front of the governor because he's going to have his own personal feedback. But then also Travis and Sean in our comms shop. I think from a policy perspective, this is headed in the right direction, but the governor and his comms team are going to have specific feedback too.
Okay, great.
Okay, so thank you. The next challenge that we face is a branding one, specific to Dylan's point about the comm shop having input. Skill Up and the state name is evidently quite common. There are multiple states who have undertaken a Skill Up X. So there's Skill Up Oklahoma, there's Skill Up Connecticut. This is a framework that actually quite a few states have used. So there is an opportunity here to potentially brand in a way that's more unique to us. And so what I would suggest and what I've discussed very briefly with the commissioner is maybe grabbing the 406 jobs title as our workforce framework, as our workforce strategy framework, and simply narrowing our focus to 4 pathways to work, 0 barriers to employment, 6 high demand industries. But taking what we see here on the screen under hire and scale, because they're important, and identifying them as exactly what they are, which are barriers to employment. So then this barriers to employment category you see here on the left becomes the employee-employer systems delineation. So let me show you a little bit about what that could look like. And I'm just going to switch my screen share here. Not to sort of upend the whole table here, but I think this might give us a little bit more unique branding to take a slightly different approach. So this here would look, so this would be the general framework, right? 406 jobs, career, college, entrepreneurship, military, or military in service. And then that 0 barriers to employment category narrows to prepared employees, engaged employers, responsive system. So then this looks like the employee-employer system delineation that we had in the Skill Up plan, just rebranded to be something that is unique to Montana. And then again, the same 6 high demand industries. So I want to walk through here a little bit about what this might look like in practice, just while we have some time here. So when we talk about 4 pathways to work, in my opinion, this is where we create the framework for all of our partners to come together and feel like they have a place in the state workforce system. So when we define these pathways, we can show all of the things that people can be working on at the local and regional levels to create pathways for both youth and adult into work. And we recognize that these things are not sort of narrow corridors, but really, I think, as Jason has said, more of a lattice where people will move across these different categories over time. But I think this 4 number, the very first number, is where we really unify the system together and show that all of these things that are happening in the different agencies in the private sector, in the MUS, at the local level, with EDAs and chambers and industry groups, are really where we come together as a unified system with all of these different types of ways to develop skills and head into the workforce as a part of our unified state workforce system. So when we talk specifically about military, we often think only about the veteran transition, but what about actually encouraging people to enter into the military? So again, I think if we think about this category correctly, we bring our whole workforce system together under this particular pillar of the plan. We haven't changed the content, we're just rebranding it in a very structured way. And then again, the 0 barriers to employment is really where we've just sort of gone from horizontal to vertical and tucked these in here. So if we begin focusing on 0 barriers to employment, I think this is where SWIB and our workforce partners really start to identify the strategic priorities. What are we going to focus on at a statewide level, at a systemic level, to bring down barriers to work? And it can be in any of these categories, right? So this is where we have the employee, the employers, and the system work. Haven't lost any of the content from the Skill Up framework. We've just rebranded it here. And this is where I think SWIB creates some or recommends some strategic priorities in specific initiatives with our workforce partners to address statewide challenges. And I really want to call your attention here to these, what I would call 5 pillars. We've had a lot of conversation about this. If we're going to prepare people to be nimble, we really want to think about them having 5 boxes checked as they enter the workforce system. Technical skills, employability skills, digital, financial, and civic skills. These are consistent with WIOA. It's what we hear employers wanting, and it's how we prepare people to be nimble across the system. So I think addressing barriers to employment is our statewide strategic prioritization. These are all the areas where we need to work, and on an annual basis, we just create action items within them. And then at the local level, I think this is where we focus on our high demand industries. So we've defined here and we've talked about our 6 areas where the labor market information shows that there is significant and persistent gaps between the number of people working and the number of jobs available. But this, I think, is a local effort or a regional effort. I think this is where we want to grab the Fed's sector framework and begin encouraging local sectoral based partnerships in one or all 6 of these high demand industries to identify local strategies to encourage people to head into these occupations. And then have SWIB serve as the sort of facilitator or convener and coordinator of those local efforts. So I think if we think about this this framework, the 4 pathways to work becomes the place where the whole system comes together. Zero barriers to employment is where we have statewide strategic initiatives, and the high demand industries are where we have the localized industry-based focus on specific occupation and filling those gaps. And I think this gives us the same exact content that we had in Skill Up, but it brands it to something that's unique to Montana rather than giving the governor a name and framework that has been used by other states. So it's not meant to change any content, just change the way that we think about it a little bit. And I'm curious as to feedback on that. If that resonates, if that seems like too abrupt of a shift, how we feel about any of what I've talked about here.
Just before I open it up for discussion, I just have to say, Jennifer, you have done an absolutely fantastic job with this.
Thank you.
I mean, this is seriously well done. With that, I don't want to shape the discussion, but I felt that needed to be said. So I'll open it up.
By way of background, I would love to share with the group that, like I said, I did share this with the governor in my ops review yesterday, but I also shared it with the full cabinet at our cabinet retreat in December. So this will not come as a surprise to our other partners in the state workforce system across agencies. And globally, everyone is really excited for SWIB's leadership, the facilitation of stakeholders that SWIB has been pulling together, and this movement forward. So I too think it's a great effort, and I'm really excited to see what the board does with this moving forward so we can begin to finalize a proposal to the governor and the rest of our leadership team here in Helena.
I think it's great. I really I like the simplicity of it. And I turned away. I wanted to open up that agenda we just approved for Friday. And I see we've got 45 minutes, so that's great. I just want to make sure we had sufficient time there because this is going to generate, I think, great discussion Friday. And I'd even like to, I mean, I'm kind of maybe getting ahead of myself here, but at that Friday meeting, it's open to the public that it's the meeting. So I may invite some folks to be on just in the audience. James Easton from the Chamber Foundation. And Bo used to work with him at Billings Senior. The simplicity is fantastic. It lets people really understand it. And I think there's lots of places we can hook into this thing to drive strategy. So those are my comments.
Dylan, does the rebrand concern you, or do you understand where I'm coming from?
No, I see where you're going. I like it. I don't have any feedback beyond what's been said. I like it. It'll just kind of come down to if that's the marketing strategy that the governor and shop are going to want to go, but I think it's great.
Is there any concern that
I don't see those approaches changing anytime soon? I mean, the most malleable thing in that might be the 6 sectors that are being targeted, but I don't see the focus shifting away from those 6 sectors anytime soon.
Jason?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time to segue into this, but one of the areas we're looking at is business attraction and talent attraction. It's in lower hand box on the far right. Um, Sorry, I have some background noise here. My question is what is the strategy around that, or is that something that is too far into detail to discuss at this time? Because if we're looking at the growth charts specifically with the tech hub, we're not going to be able to supply all those jobs from Montanans directly. There is going to have to be a plan around business attraction. I'll throw that out for conversation.
I I think from my perspective, that's a key priority in this framework. And then what the specific strategy is the thing that we have next to develop. So that's really part of bringing the system together. Our system right now is bifurcated, that business attraction is one thing and talent attraction is another. And we know we have to unify those, but that's not where we sit today. So I think that's within the scope. It's been identified as a priority within the scope, and it's going to be up to us then to, actually begin working on the tactics to do that from my perspective.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. So then the question that comes to my mind is branding and how do we share that with the community? Because I expect that to be somewhat challenging.
I agree. I think the rollout is really important. My hope is that we will actually have a governor announcement of this strategy if it's adopted. And then I think we really begin a series of stakeholder meetings. And my recommendation is going to be that sort of I and WSD as your SWIB staff develop a toolkit that allows SWIB members to actually help us with some of that community engagement. Because I think we really do need to fan out and make a lot of constituencies aware of this. That's going to require a series of presentations, and I'm just one little person. So we'll need some SWIB members who are willing to go out and host some community meetings and begin sharing this. And it's up to me to give you all the tools to be prepared to do that.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer.
Is there any concern among executive committee members that doing a rebrand at this point would prevent us from being able to make a recommendation to the governor? I don't want to simply forward a recommendation that's subpar or that replicates branding in other states, but I also don't want to throw something at members where they're just like, I can't even process this. We're going to kick this off until April.
I don't see that being a problem, Jennifer. I think, like you said, the content is still the same. It just maybe looks a little bit differently. And what my only comment is, I like the fact that it's chunked out because it lets everyone know what their role is and where they kind of fit in a sense. Because if it's so broad, as we were talking about broad concepts, sometimes you don't know where you fit and what you need to do. So I think this is really nice that it chunks it out and it's very specific on where you fit. I think that's a nice thing. So I don't see it being a problem.
Yeah, I agree. You've kind of, I feel like in a past SWIB meeting, you've kind of mentioned this 406 approach as almost like complementary to Skill Up. So I know we've been talking about Skill Up, but I think it's just a name, and I don't think people are going to care what we call it.
Dylan, my perspective would be that I think we got lost in the skill up conversation with the governor's office, and it got nuanced, right? The governor's team began to see skill up as just the out of the labor force segment or just the youth segment, and it kind of has bifurcated itself into an either or. I really like that the 406 jobs proposal is the whole state workforce strategy. It is still the same, but I think we've gotten lost in the communication of what is skill up, and I'd like to separate us from that so we can come back to a strategic workforce plan.
I agree with you. I think especially when we approach our communications team about it, they're gonna bring a marketing focus to it, whereas this is, like you said, Commissioner, this is a strategic plan. I mean, it's a marketing plan also, but really it's more of a strategic plan and getting our communications team to see that. So
I like the 406 from a couple perspectives. One, it's clear to me that it's, the word scale up feels very higher ed, like it's more it's an educational component as opposed to the broadness of what it needs to be. And I think as we share this, that other states do it. I mean, Hawaii's got their 808, we got 406, but I mean, there's just sitting, you see it on hats. It's a big deal in Montana, and I think it's more inviting of all components in where I think if we share this plan to people and you just say Skillet Montana, they're going to immediately think this is an educational plan. I think. Jason, your hands up still is up. I just want to make sure I don't miss you.
Uh, all good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I just didn't want to miss one of your comments. Um, good. Any other discussion? Anything else you need, Jennifer, or would like in the chat?
No, I don't think so. I think I will be prepared to present this, and we'll have some group discussion, then some committee discussion. It's my understanding that we're still in a position of we ideally will vote to recommend this to the governor in January, get his feedback at the time and place appropriate, assuming that he is willing to adopt this and make this, sort of a statewide priority. Then I think we come back to the conversation of how do we structure SWIB to really begin advancing this, and that's going to affect our committees. So we'll have some committee work time during the Friday meeting to talk about some of these initiatives, but I think we're still a little bit in limbo with our committees finding a home that moves this plan forward.
No, I agree, and I think as you went through the details through that your PowerPoint slide from an industry perspective, it gave me, I feel like there's a place for me as industry, and there's also a responsibility. I mean, to help with workforce in general, as opposed to it's somebody else's problem. You know, it feels like I said, more inclusive to getting industry at the table, which is an important part, and hopefully the governor is looking for that as well. Next on the agenda is just some general committee discussion, a number of things. SWIB vacancies. Jennifer, do we have some of those coming up?
We have two. So we still have our local elected official vacancy that we have not filled. There has been a
Yes,
recommendation for a mayor who I've not yet been able to discern if he has completed his paperwork and we're just waiting on the boards and appointment staff or if he has not yet. So I've got an email into her to find out if he's filled out that paperwork or not. And then we do have the vacancy left by Deb. So my goal it would be to develop some recommendations around those high demand sectors where we don't have representation on SWIB right now. So someone in hospitality and recreation, someone in financial or professional services. If SWIB members have thoughts about that, please send them to me. I think there's opportunities to look at major recreation leaders, major hoteliers. We know accounting is a significant gap, so financial services or accounting sort of statewide voice. If you have thoughts about any of those, send to me, send to Paul. But I'd like to start doing some recruiting sooner rather than later and get those filled.
Great. Site visits during our in-person meetings. We have two of those a year, and
yeah, are there places that people would like to go? We've got Butte in April, Billings in July, and are we in Lewistown or Great Falls? I forget, somewhere more central for the fall meeting. And I just wanted to open up and get SWIB, committee members and SWIB members thinking now of whether or not there's site visits. I heard, I think there's some interest in going to see Job Corps in Anaconda when we're in Butte in April. But if there are other site visits or things that people really want to see, I just wanted to open that conversation.
thoughts from the group?
I would make a plug for my hometown of Fort Benton. The agriculture, even though it's still a big part of Montana and what we do in the state of Montana. So there's various industries in Fort Benton that are actually relatively new. There's a hemp industry there right now. And so there's been some discussion, even at the legislative level. Yesterday, I was listening to some bills being heard. So that would be a suggestion. There's some flour mills also in Fort Benton that might be of interest to people. So that's just my selfish plug for Fort Benton.
Mhm.
I'm not
The
opposed to
good plug then.
all. I think that'd be a great location. I know the governor's actually mentioned that hemp operation and some of the other stuff. That brewery that you guys have there has been a big partner with us in the business equipment tax sector. But Lewistown, I think, would also present some cool opportunities for advanced manufacturing and looking at how advanced manufacturing can thrive in some of our smaller communities. And then also Regent Southworth is there and is with Allied Steel, and he might be able to be kind of a host for us, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll just add in Lewistown, we have the VACCOM project, which I believe is a Big Springs project, phase one, which is underway, which I think would be of interest as well.
Thank you.
In Butte, Jennifer, are we going to be at is it Highlands College or where were we thinking about?
Probably at Tech itself, just for
At
space.
Tech. Okay.
But that would be my recommendation is to go there. And I identified Butte just because it got us out of Helena, but still was fairly close to Helena for people who might have legislative commitments. So
Yes.
um I think, that gives us a chance on Thursday to go up and see Job Corps for those who want to. And then if there are places in Butte that, people would like to see as well, we can try to incorporate that and then do our meeting on Friday. I know there's actually quite a few conflicts that week in terms of, I think the Hospital Association, Heather, has their annual meeting that week. Montana STEM has their annual meeting that week. So it's going to be a busy week, but hopefully we've calendared it far enough out that SWIB members can be in attendance.
Sounds good. Next is committee and board priorities, and I think as we discussed, a lot has to be sorted out hopefully
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to ask this committee. My attention has been on the strategic framework, but are there other issues that are of significant priority to either this executive committee or the board that you want to see incorporated in agendas throughout the year? We will have new RFPs for adult and youth WIOA funds going out, and I know the WIOA committee has been talking about that, so that will be a big issue this summer. But are there other priorities, things of interest, things that are significant to board members that we need to be reflecting on agendas throughout the year?
One thing I'd like to see, and maybe this is already done in a way, is just a recap of what are the federal funding opportunities and who's doing what in that space related to workforce.
Okay, thank you.
My initial thoughts were along the lines of what you mentioned, Jennifer, that are the performance of our youth providers. And we've talked about that just to make sure we're keeping that on the table.
Another thing to add is possibly during our WIOA meeting, Commissioner McGinley asked for some data from OPI. A lot of data actually. Well, I actually added to it. I'll be honest with you. He was pretty specific and I added on. But so as we talk about that in WIOA yes, it might be nice for the board to hear that information too. Because I think that might be of interest to people. So something down the road.
Great.
This isn't an agenda item, Sarah, but I'm sorry, Jennifer's. I just read Sarah's note. The Susie Hetland, will she be joining this group?
Yeah, the superintendent of schools is a statutory member.
Okay, very good.
Of the executive committee or just the board as a whole?
Of the board as a whole. She sits on the WIOA committee.
Okay. For some reason, I was thinking that she was on the executive committee because Elsie was often at these meetings. So
No, Elsie was the OPI superintendent and the head of voc rehab are WIOA standing members, but they are not
Okay.
executive members according to your guys' bylaws.
Okay. Interesting. Any other priorities that come to mind? I mean, my only other final thought would be that it feels like once the 406 jobs is approved and move forward, there might be standing items that come out of that in terms of touch points to stay
Sure.
on top of it. I just can't rationalize or put that in words at this point, but it feels like they'll be there.
Okay.
And Bo, I didn't mean to cut you off. You jumped up on my screen there for a second.
Bo must be having
Like,
some
yeah.
technical issues because he's popping in
Okay.
and out of the meeting. So
Okay. And the last item is the NGA Summer Workforce Institute.
Yeah, I
yeah,
had the list too.
go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, I was just gonna say we got an email from Jack Porter with the NGA here recently, and they're having that meeting out in DC March 12th through the 14th. And so we need to send a couple of people there. Jennifer, of course, needs to be there, but then either myself or Sarah or both, we will just, I think we'll try and make that happen one way or another, even if it's a very quick flight in and out. But our goal is to make a pitch for Montana to host the Summer Workforce Institute. And so we're working with the governor's scheduler on dates. I guess we need to maybe set a follow-up meeting, Jennifer, with just meeting
Yeah.
with her to talk about what that pitch is going to look like. I mean, I think they're leaning towards Montana hosting, but we still need to put together a good pitch for what that would look like. And then, of course, if we end up getting afforded that opportunity, then we'll have to bring in the whole SWIB because it's quite a bit of work. If you've been to one of those conferences, it's gonna take quite a bit of effort on our part to put together a good national convening here in Montana. So
Yeah, I think that's right. So
follow up, Jennifer. I don't know if you can look at Sarah's calendar and get a follow up meeting set, but we should
I
probably
sure can. Yeah. So thank you, Dylan, for saying that because we do need when the governor will send a letter to NGA before the March meeting saying we would like to be considered. These are the dates that we would, be available to host. And here is our planning team. So we kind of need to decide who's going to be on that planning team. Presumably it's myself, Dylan, Sarah, Paul. I don't know if you want to be on, but we need to kind of put together who the team is going to be so that NGA sort of formally knows who to communicate with. But Paul, I would also note that during that Winter Institute, there is a meeting for state workforce agencies and state workforce board chairs. So if you're able to go, we the state of Montana will present to both of those groups. So if you're able to be there, that would be helpful.
Okay, super. And that's March, Dylan, you said 12th through the 14th?
12th through the 14th, yeah.
Okay. I wish I was always over when I went the last time, it was over the weekend.
Hmm.
But that's Wednesday through Thursday. And I think there's a shot I can make that. I couldn't last year. And I think just thinking back to those pitches that people made, um, there were good ones and there were bad ones, to be blunt. And
I mean, not to disrespect our colleagues in Connecticut. I don't know any of them, but they had the only pitch, and I didn't think they just had a short PowerPoint that I didn't think was anything spectacular. So.
when it was kind of contentious. It was some big locations vying, and North Dakota got it and unanimously. And I think Seattle and Los Angeles were like, how's that even possible? Because why would anybody go to Fargo? And uh, but the but it was, it was impressive. I mean, the directors vote in a separate meeting and then the chairs vote in a separate meeting and they have to match. So wow. I mean, like I said, North Dakota was impressive. They had, showed little nightlife things, but it wasn't, one of the presenters just presented entrees at restaurants that we won't be eating at anyway. So I didn't understand the point of that. But but anyway, no, I will look at my calendar and it'd be a great thing for Montana to showcase our state.
Yeah, it would be
a decision before our drop dead deadline is kind of February 19th. I emailed Jack, so we need to probably have a and probably have a plan in place this month.
Okay. Well, I do think we need to have some swag. It's my understanding it's tradition to give out some swag bags. So if people have thoughts about what kind of Montana products or places or what, I mean, what we would want to highlight in that, please let me know. Um, we can obviously there's lots of options. We can work with the tourism bureaus to put some of that together as well. But a couple, one or two, three fun Montana products, I think would be fun to share. Sarah gave all of us directors this Huckleberry vanilla chip cookie that was unbelievable. So that's high on my list because it was really good.
Uh, the staff over at Business Attraction and kind of the international affairs folks at the Department of Commerce do this all the time. I'd say we should just reach out to the Department of Commerce, and they've
Perfect.
got entire storage rooms full of options that we could.
Perfect.
Is there a date for that summer meeting? I just want to.
The ones that I have recommended to the governor's office, if his schedule is available, would be the 16th, 17th, and 18th of July, which is why I put our SWIB meeting on the 15th. So we could have our SWIB meeting and then do the NGA convention.
Okay. Okay.
Is
Sounds
that a
good.
challenge?
Well, I may be in Italy, but I don't know what those dates look like yet.
Well,
So
it's hard to feel sympathy for you, Paul, when
I put that trip off for so long. I got to do it. But um, but no, my schedule is totally backseat to the governor. So
yeah, we'll see what he
you know,
says.
what works. I'll do my best. So perfect. That just helps me think about. Sad to say, but gotta start thinking about slotting things in the summer already. It's only February, January. Very good.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the laundry list of items or anything else to bring before the group? Okay, I think for the record, I'll call for it, though I don't see any additional faces that have joined us. Public comment.
There is no one online.
Okay. With that, we will see you all on Friday, and I will adjourn the meeting.